And thank you for joining the Society for Clinical Research sites. Our third module in the Clinical Trial Odyssey series, today's title is What's Behind the Curtain? Centralized Monitoring Unveiled. Our presenters today are DiGregorio, the Director of Centralized Monitoring for PRA, Sherry Merrifield, Senior Director of Global Operations Management at Syneos Health, Phillips, Associate Director of Centralized Monitoring Services at IQVIA, Poindexter, the President of Advances in Health, and Carrye Nibbelink, Director of Adaptive Trial Management and Monitoring Innovation at PRA. Immediately following today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a survey. And to successfully receive your contact hour credit, you must be logged on to WebEx. As an individual, remain present for the webinar in its entirety and complete the post-webinar survey. If 3 requirements are met, you will receive contact hour certificate via email within 30 days. There is contact hour credit offered for listening to the recording of this presentation. If you're on this presentation and you haven't received your contact hour credit yet from me, please be patient. We had our EU Summit last week and that kind of bogged our resources, but I will be getting those out this week. Any questions, please use the Q&A feature in WebEx. You can find that. There's an icon in the top right of your WebEx screen. It says Q with a question mark in a box, and you can ask questions of the panel during the presentation. The webinar will continue for approximately 1 hour, and I'm happy to turn it over to our panel.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, as Mike said, for in a 4-part series we've named What's Behind the Curtain? Centralized Monitoring Unveiled. In this one, we're going to explore centralized monitoring, activity that takes place away from your clinical trial sites, behind the curtain, so to speak, but it's an activity that really plays a very important supporting role in the evolving clinical monitoring strategy. Our intent is to provide you with some insight into how sponsors and CROs are leveraging technology to improve the quality of study results and the safety of subjects. So I'm Merrifield. We're all going to introduce ourselves as we go through our sections, but I'm Sherry Merrifield. I'm Senior Director in Global Operations Management at Syneos Health. And in curtain theme, I'm going to set the stage for our presentation. So the series is entitled A Clinical Trial Odyssey, and it's a collaboration of SCRS and CRO's CEO Forum. And we're concentrating on the evolution of risk-based monitoring and of the ICH guidance update. Focus on the impact that has on you at the clinical site level. We all know risk-based monitoring has been part of our industry for quite a while. But now with the issuance of that ICH 602, it's really taken on a different level of significance to all of us. And if you haven't been impacted by it yet, most likely you will very soon. So our first session occurred about 3 weeks ago. And during that session, they provided an overview of the impact of that ICH 602 on sites and sponsors. And Nicole and Kristen reviewed the revised ICH guidelines, and they discussed the impact to sites and sponsors, and they used real-world examples to put those changes into context. Our session focused on risk assessment and investigative sites. And Bill and Mike, they expanded our thinking around how our roles, particularly at the site level, can really contribute to that risk assessment discussion. They also do some really fancy polling techniques in their presentation. So if you missed one or both of those sessions, you can access them, the links to their recordings within the SCRS system. So if you haven't been able to attend those in the past, take a look at those. And today, we're going to address an area that you may or may not be familiar with, but is comprising one of the key updates to that ICH 6 guidance, centralized monitoring. And in our earlier sessions, the behavior of your on-site monitors may be evolving and changing. So you've seen changes there. But it's important to understand that those site activities, by hive of activity, it's really happening behind that curtain. So to examine how the ICH guidance has focused attention on the value of that centralized monitoring activity, and how, as sponsors and CROs, we're using people, technology, and process to support that centralized monitoring piece. Share a case study and to explore some of those new technologies that are emerging that are going to impact how to collect and analyze data in support of our studies. It's important, I think, for all of us that we don't believe that on-site monitoring is going away, right? So that's still happening. But the ICH guidance is really providing that initiative to use the evolving technological capabilities, right, that are out there now to analyze study data in a way that our individual site monitors really couldn't do in the past. I mean, I was a CRA, and we were looking at the sites that we would visit, and we would look across at the sites that we were responsible for. And if you think about a phase 3 study where a CRA is typically assigned 10 to 12 sites, and within that site, we're looking at 10 to 12 subjects. With centralized analytics and centralized monitoring, that real-time data review, those CRAs have access to the content of the ongoing study-wide trends, outliers, that in addition to the site and within subject trends at their own, that they have access to. And centralized monitoring is giving us the capability to look at really large volumes of data and impact on that data. So that information is becoming part of the toolbox used by your site monitors to support you, help all of us do a better job, ensure safer subjects, quality data, and serve a more efficient way of doing things. I add my reminder to Mike that we appreciate your feedback. We want this to be a dialogue. We want to hear about how this is working at the sites that are experiencing it. So we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the session. But in the meantime, and when we get there, please do remember to use that Q&A box at the top of your screen to ask any questions as they come along. For that, we'll move to the next slide where we will open our polling. There we go. So just take a minute, answer this question. At this time, do you know that you understand the definition of centralized monitoring? Yes. As your choice, just consider your experience as an investigative site and your knowledge of the process to date. So the intent of this question is really to get, for us, a baseline knowledge of your understanding before we get to the full content of our students. So hopefully, and see a lot of no's, we're going to be able to rectify that in our few slides. First slide, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Megan. And you're going to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Megan DiGregorio, one of the directors of Centralized Monitoring at PRA Health Sciences. So I'm going to basically cover, you probably have seen this slide before in webinar 1, where Nicole and Kristen touched a little bit on the definition of centralized monitoring per ICH E6RU. So what I like to do is really, as the polling is, and you're answering that question, really getting into the definition and hoping that after we define it, you will have an understanding of what centralized monitoring means to you as a site. Are there any roles that are part of the data review process in an RBM model? We will talk a little about what's behind the curtain, as Sherry mentioned, and why it's important to understand how these roles, along with the use of technology, can lead to better data integrity as well as patient safety. And I'm going to pause right there because it looks like the poll has closed. And it looks like, you know, a lot of people have a pretty good understanding, yes, of the definition of centralized monitoring. So that's terrific. I think, you know, Webinar 1 did an excellent job of, I think, you know, the education behind this, and I think a lot of you have done RBM studies already and have that knowledge. So hopefully after this we can, you know, even improve that even more, you know, as well. It's just great to see that there's more yeses than nos there. So I just address that. So kind of jumping back onto the definition of what I was covering is, one of the advantages of using centralized monitoring is to focus on the important pieces of a study, focusing on the critical data and the critical processes. You see less on-site monitoring from your CRA, but this doesn't mean that the data will not be reviewed by various roles within, you know, having that different hat, wearing a different, looking at things with a different perspective on the data. You may be a data scientist role or a data reviewer. Many companies call things a little bit differently, but they're very similar. They're all reviewing that data, especially at a high level and at a lower level, at a site level, or looking at trends at a high analytical exploratory view. What you may see is a central monitor role. And this role basically looks at the data for the assigned sites, and they may be the primary contact for the site. And again, every company does things a little bit differently, but this could also be the role of your CRA, as Sherry mentioned, looking at some of the analytics and then talking with the sites about what they're seeing and some of the, you know, figuring out that root cause. So this may be conducting a review of the data remotely. When we say remotely, again, we want to make sure we're not asking sites to fax in any source documentation. When we say remotely, we're using technology, you know, to review trends and conduct logic checks on the data without the use of faxing any type of source documentation. So in webinars 1 and 2, the focus was really on the critical data process of a study and conducting a risk assessment, as you probably heard in webinar 2. So once we have the risk assessment completed, we have to continue to assess each study for unknown risks. And a lot of them can happen during the life of the study. You know, we may know what the risks are through our risk assessment, but of course, as we go through the life of the study, things pop up, things happen. And using analytics and some technology, we can really take advantage of that and leverage that in a way that allows us to see things and mitigate things that pop up. It results in a more dynamic type of monitoring and targeted approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all model anymore. So the site could really have a specific monitoring plan for which it includes various types of review, both on-site and off-site, as well as, you know, the use of site management. Go to the next slide. The state of our technology allows us to take advantage of some analytical methodologies. But as we continue on this odyssey, it's going to be really important to advance the technology in order to, again, really be able to look at data, look at trends in more real time. Because that's really what it's all about. The sooner we can look at that data, the faster we can make decisions and mitigate things, and even prevent mistakes from happening over and over again before we even go on site. And this helps direct those CRAs as to where they go when they are on site. They're able to focus on what's important and not have to worry about extraneous things. So our monitoring is enhanced by centralized data activities, and it's facilitated by the technology required to support it. There are a lot of activities and roles involved in this process. Definitely a lot more to come with the technology piece here as we head into the future state. It's definitely evolving in the industry. It's a revolution, and hoping definitely to hear a lot of great feedback from you as the site to really help us along this journey to really, you know, define what is working, what's not working. At this point, I'm going to hand off to my colleague Linda Phillips for the next few slides that she will cover the different types in the monitoring type. So Linda, introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yep. Hi everyone. My name's Linda Phillips from IQVIA, and I'm Associate Director for Centralized Monitoring Services services. So looking at the different types of monitoring that we can now facilitate. So with the implementation of E6, it really does support the development of a based approach to monitoring on clinical trials. So it gives flexibility to look at the extent and the nature of any monitoring that's being carried out and make sure that it's the most effective and the most efficient way of actually monitoring that particular protocol. So for a particular trial, you could have various different types of monitoring occurring. So as we talked earlier, we still are always going to have our on-site monitoring, which is going to be carried out in the main still by our CRAs. So that's following up with the sites as part of the normal site management activities, performing source data verification as that is required, and performing source data review as well. So checking the processes that lead to the data to make sure that those sources are in place. And verifying facility and equipment as well, and also the overall quality and conduct of the study. And looking at the normal IP and regulatory verification as well, so making sure that all of that is in place. What we can have, one can allow is we can then allow some off-site monitoring as well. So off-site monitoring, again, being carried out normally by the CRAs, but what that allows us to do is have those contact points outside of the normal on-site visiting or monitoring, and therefore you can still get a formal sort of a visit in terms of following up, but does not have to be on-site, and allows both way communication between the site and the CRA in order to make sure that we're supporting them. And again, as Megan said, that monitoring does not involve any way backing in of any source documentation or anything. It really is a remote visit, I suppose, in terms of being able to coordinate and manage any of the risks that have been identified, looking at management activities that they can follow up with over the phone. Some inquiries coming from the site. So if there are ways for them to complete any data review activities and to touch base with the site on those as well. Behind all of that, what you're going to have is you're going to have the centralized monitoring approach as well, so that we're able to then support the on-site and the remote or off-site monitoring with a centralized monitoring group or personnel that will actually help identify those sorts of risks and those areas that should be followed up on, and therefore helping the CRA prioritize. So the main, I suppose, background to it, being that should help promote a better site relationship and a better communication with the site, because they will have more time in terms of being able to sit at the site and actually talk to people on site as well. So, looking at the areas that centralized monitoring teams will cover. So again, they're looking at technology, look data quality, and looking at critical data. Also, looking at those analytics that Megan mentioned as well. So using those to really drive the decision making, and also to those areas that need to be followed up with. And looking at metrics related to each of the sites then as well, and also then if there's additional on-site time required, being able to trigger those contacts and on-site visits to make sure that any issues can be proactively covered. And again, we mentioned there are a lot of roles or names out there for those different centralized monitoring teams. Some may be data managers, data scientists, statisticians, medical staff, or central monitors. But then essentially, as part of centralized monitoring, really what they're doing, they're supporting on-site in being able to proactively identify areas of follow-up. So the second polling question. So what is not a part of centralized monitoring? So requesting subject source documentation to be faxed, identification of site of data trends, enhanced data quality, or all of the above. Answering this polling question, I'll hand over to my colleague Melissa to introduce herself.
Good morning. This is Melissa Poindexter. I'm with Advances in Health in Houston. We established in 1998, and interesting, it was 8 years after the initiation of the ACH guidelines in the U.S., which was in 1990. I also have to mention that our PI has been part of this clinical trial odyssey for 7 years. So to say, we've come a long way since 1990. Let's get into the case study. I thought it would be easier to understand centralized monitoring if I broke it down into what I refer to as the 4 A's of centralized monitoring. The first A is acquiring the data, which is completed at the site and includes the vital signs, height, weight, lab results, procedure reports, etc. I think I'll stop right here. I see that, no, we're not done yet with the results from the, yes, we are. So, in recalling question number 2, yeah, that is correct. Requesting subject source documents to be faxed is not a part of centralized monitoring. So that A is the correct answer. So returning back to the 4 A's of centralized monitoring, the A is in the data, which is by the central monitor. As mentioned earlier, it's important to note there are many names for the role of central monitors and data scientists, but the tasks performed are very similar under the umbrella of centralized monitoring. The data, and it's completed not just by one person, but entire clinical development group of medical monitors, central monitors, data managers, data scientists, all viewing and analyzing the data in different ways. The 4th is for action. It is analyzed and a problem is identified. Action may be taken, such as an administrative letter or a protocol change. After, I just want to, before I go into the case study, to please use the Q&A function for your questions in the chat box. Now let's review the case study, which will help you to understand how centralized monitoring is operationalized. Don't apply the 4 A's as we go through the case study. As behind the curtain, visualize a team of central monitors assigned to a group of subjects to follow out the course of the subject's participation. With Abby Brown, a subject participating in a powerful study of an oral investigational drug. She has completed her visit 6. A monitor is assessing the information acquired at the site and posted by an EDC by the coordinator, along with the lab results transmitted by the central lab. The monitor reviews Abby's vital signs and notices a slight increase in her blood sugar since the visit, and also a gradual increase at each visit since baseline. It's noted her liver enzymes are elevated. Assessing data of other assigned to the study, to the monitor, it's noted that the elevations are not unique to Abby Brown. The center flags the data and sends an alert to the data scientist. As of the alert, the data scientist reviews similar data for all study participants, typically reports, AE, and blood pressures. The data scientist confirms a trend. The team is notified of a possible global trend, and they analyze the data. And concludes it is in the best interest of subject safety to take action. They amend the protocol and to add safety liver enzymes at each visit, and also to drop any subject whose pressures are greater than 160/90. They decide to add blood pressures and liver enzymes as key data points to be verified at 100% of all the subjects. And next slide, we look back at traditional monitoring. In traditional monitoring, it would have taken months data to be reviewed and longer to reveal the safety issues. Projectors relied on the monitoring reports for their information. These were submitted after the on-site visit, after all the white sheets were torn, and after the data was entered. So it took a while to receive data and analyze. I think the summary has helped you to understand and I'll say accept how the implementation of centralized monitoring and technology will allow for faster, informed decision-making and subject safety. End of our summary and our case study, And now I'd like to introduce Carrye, who will talk about the future of centralized monitoring technology.
Science and focus on adaptive trial management and monitoring and innovation. So really development and the methodology around risk-based monitoring. Today, one of the things to just build upon what's already been presented to you is focusing on how, everything is being inundated with technology advancements, use of your cell phone, the applications that you use within your cell phone. You're seeing this kind of come into our industry at a very fast pace. And just as an example, a lot of you have experience, within the banking industry, getting alerts or notifications and being able to manage your accounts easily on your phone. And this type of technology is coming into place and helping us with being able to centralize our monitoring and using technology as a benefit. To walk through the four main components here, first, study planning. Now, we do a risk assessment that has been discussed previously that helps with focusing on the centralized monitoring on the critical processes, critical data, and the safety of the subject. When we're identifying these risks, these risks are going to be translated into training and support that we provide each of you, and understanding how the protocol is going to be operationalized at your particular site. As it's been mentioned in the previous by Melissa and others, the data access is really important, and be able to get that data to us through technology and growing that, with wearables and other applications that are in development, for example, e-consent. That access is going to change, ability to assess data more and shift our assessment into real-time review. And being able to really empower us to, from a centralized monitoring perspective, look at what the protocol requirements are and then move into the analytics that are going to be applied. There's different analytics that are in development. I'm sure a lot of you have heard machine learning and the concepts around artificial intelligence. This, we're going to see further advancements in pattern identification and really helping with that, patterns that prompt us to do further investigation. And further investigation is going to be surfaced through that fourth component of reporting and visualization. Use tables and charts and with advertisements on TV, with applications that you use on your cell phone. All these things will also be coming into our industry and advancing the way that we're prompted to look at the analytics, but then be able to take action on what those analytics are telling us so that we help support decision making, but also bring that information into you so that we can address the root cause in a proactive fashion and manner. The next slide. Our final polling question, and again, your participation is very much appreciated with your thoughts and your insight. Question here that we're asking is, do you understand the impact of central monitoring at your site with the options of A, B, and C? That, we'll give you a moment to take some time here, but we're wanting to make sure that, our training was clear and helpful for each of you that's on the phone to further elaborate on, not only what current state is of centralized monitoring, but how we're going to be using technology for future state to help enable us to partner together to be successful. So to the next slide, the benefits that we're looking at from, why does centralized monitoring help each of you on the phone? We focus on key areas of the safety of the subject, regulatory requirements, and in addition to that, the data integrity. So this focus of the centralized monitoring group helps with decreasing the amount of audit findings for critical audit findings more than the traditional monitoring. So this equals to you less 483s. With the industry moving towards us having access to data at a faster pace, this allows us to investigate and help support and work with you to address the root cause. And before I move on, I'm going to pause here. And it looks like, so just to go back to the polling question, using an understanding of centralized monitoring at your site, we got the responses of yes and a better understanding because of the webinar. So please, if you do have questions, post those in the Q&A so that we have time allotted to be able to answer some of those questions so that we can further have an understanding of maybe, not only your questions, but what your apprehensions are. So let's up this summary. The third item talked about fewer audit findings, having the data available to us. So with us allowing us to have this data available to us, we're going to help with data efficiencies and addressing the root cause with a quicker turnaround, allowing for fewer mistakes because we're going to be able to partner with you on addressing that root cause, but in addition to that, providing you the support, for the protocol requirements. With ability, it's going to really give us that focus of addressing the root cause so we can do process improvements. Thus, allowing each of you to spend more time with your subjects and process improvement. So really getting back to that subject centricity. So overall, with timely review allows issues to be addressed in an expedited manner with addressing the root cause. This allows for more time for you to be subject-based, focus or subject centricity, and process improvement. So is open it up for the Q&A. Please post your questions so that we can respond to those.
I think we've had one question in so far, and let me just open it up here. So, can we please clarify the difference between SDV and SDR? So, who wants to take that one from?
I can take that, Linda. It's Megan DiGregorio from PRA. So the difference between source data verification and source data review, again, I think various companies interchange this a little bit, but the overall definition of source data verification is basically anything that is in EDC as a data point, we're verifying that back to the source, medical chart, your electronic health record, basically verifying that there is a source behind that data point that's put into your EDC system. So that's kind of that data verification. Another piece of data review has nothing to do with EDC at all. It's really opening up that medical chart. So when your CRA is on site, they should be opening up that medical chart and reviewing that patient. Now, of course, there's different methodologies of maybe looking at every single subject. They may be choosing 1 out of 3, 1 out of 5, or 1 out of 10 approach, something like that. Everything is a little bit different across the industry. But it's reopening that medical chart or that EHR system and just getting the whole holistic view of the patient. It has nothing to do with verifying anything back to EDC. It's making sure that adverse events are documented and things like that. So hopefully that answered that question. And if it didn't, please post within the Q&A again. Back to you, Linda, to read the next question.
Okay, so the next question is can you explain the details of real-time data review?
Sherry, I think I can say that at least initially. So the real-time data review is really something that because of our advances in technology. So where before we used to, and I remember these days, we used to write data down. The coordinators would record the data using 3-part NCR binders, and some of you may not even be aware of this. And the monitors would come and they'd tear those pages. They would send back in-house, and that information would get double data entered into a system. The first time people actually were able to look at that data was once that was in, and that might not happen until like an inter-analysis or even the final analysis. So now we've got information being captured at this level in the EDC systems. We've got labs generated in electronic systems. We've got lots of different systems providing us access to that data in pretty much real time. As soon as it gets entered, we can take a look at it. So this is the ability, using groups like our centralized monitoring groups, to cleanse that data, look for outliers, look for areas where maybe the data isn't behaving the way we expect it to. Of course, that's all designed to the analysis plan. When that data isn't behaving the way we expect it to, we investigate, right? Perhaps that is exactly what, maybe that is correct data, but maybe it's an indication that the procedures aren't being performed exactly the same way at one site, or with patients, they're not taking their medication exactly the same way, as an example. But it gives us that ability to look at the data as it's coming in and make our monitoring decisions and follow up so that we can clean that data and make sure we're addressing any issues in real time. And that also helps us to prevent reach of issues because we're looking at it in that timely basis. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
Build on that. This is Carrye again. With technology advances that we're seeing, for example, the wearables, the direct vendor transfers of data from your sites, this allows us to put alerts and notifications. That also aids in identification of some trends that could possibly prompt us to do some further investigation.
Okay, there's more question that has come through from chat as well. So, does the study team identify the key parameters requiring 100% SDV, and what is an acceptable error rate?
So I can. That's Megan. So basically, when we're looking at the percent of SDV or the critical variables, those are identified through the risk assessment. So the risk assessment is going to tell us what critical variables we're going to be doing 100% review or verification on. As far as error rates, we're really at that point yet. We're really kind of getting into the world of quality tolerance limits and thresholds, and that's really something that's going to be further developed. Each company is kind of, getting into more of quality tolerance limits and what's the percent of error as a therapeutic area for particular types of studies and so forth, but it's really the risk assessment that's going to be identifying what are those critical variables that we're going to be doing 100% SDV on. Hopefully that answers your question, or if anybody else wants to add.
Yeah, this is Shrey, and I think that it's relative to the way we used to look at it in some ways too, right? It's now, as Megan said, we're in the stages of this and trying to determine what acceptable parameters are. But in the past, right, even when we were doing 100% source data verification, it was a matter of training, identifying those areas that were perhaps not transcribed appropriately, and going back and retraining and trying to find out why that happened and correct it for the future, right? So as far as source data verification, where we're really all we're doing there is the ability to transcribe from source documents into the data capture system. And so as we move forward in our to reduce that source data verification based on the risk assessment and the targeted critical data points, I think we'll probably get closer to an acceptable area and be able to actually measure that. But at this point, it's still pretty much the same process we were using before.
Okay, we're questioning then, so explain the best process for a sponsor and CRO setting up what things to check for in advance during centralized monitoring, i.e. should the study medical monitor be part of the process?
This is Carrye. I can take that. It's recommended, so within our risk assessment, one of the key components that we also work through are the mitigation strategies, and that helps define what's going to be the focus by centralized monitoring. And just to kind of define everybody's understanding there, when we're talking about centralized monitoring, this makes up a team of individuals or core responsibilities, including the medical monitor, the statistician, the central monitoring role in data management and safety. So those components combine into the centralized monitoring, and they're part of that risk assessment.
Another Q&A question.
I can see another one in chat. So just to respond, I would expect the variables for 100% STV would likely increase, and this could be on a site per basis of quality data. So not if that is clear in terms of a response to that.
So this is, and I think what they're asking there, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, as we're looking at the data through trending and analytics as well as on-site, off-site monitoring, if we're seeing that a particular site and we need to increase maybe the SDV level at that particular site, we have that capability through technology within EDC. Metadata Rave has a targeted SDV model where we can actually push sites into a tier where we can do more SDV. And again, that is going to be figured out between, you know, the CRO and the sponsor, you know, back to Carrye's, you know, response about, you know, just evaluating where the root cause is and what the best approach would be. Sometimes it's not always about increasing SDV. Sometimes it's about going on site and looking at just the source and kind of getting more of that bigger holistic picture. So again, root causes can take us down many paths as to what, you know, the best way to mitigate what that issue is. So hopefully it answered your question, and if anybody wants to chime in as well.
Yeah, so just on there that, yeah, there are many paths up from increasing SDV from any of the root cause analysis that we carry out. So it may always lead to 100% SDV or an increase in SDV in any way. There may be more efficient ways to actually review data and make sure that we are providing that insight for that site and for other sites then as well, to make sure that the same sort of areas aren't coming up again in terms of requiring additional review.
So any more Q&A questions? If not, does anyone else have one more minute to add anything, if anyone has any more questions?
Any questions? So thank you for you know, sending them in. It really shows you guys, you know, have a great understanding of this, and again, as we kind of evolve in this odyssey and journey, I think a lot of you will have some great insight to kind of keep us in the loop on, you know, what's working and what's not working. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree, Megan. These are really good questions, and they're actually much more granular than I was expecting. So it's nice to see that people have a great understanding of what's happening here.
Okay, so question. So would you please provide some factors in which sites are assessed for riskers, such as number of queries, protocol deviations, that may place a site on a list for quality review?
This is Carrye. There's different analytics that are going to be applied. Some companies have standards that they're using, or standard what we call key risk indicators. And there's also usually a development of some protocol-specific indicators. So as an example, protocol deviations, one, or, you know, important deviations can be another influencing factor, but usually it's a collaboration of multiple components that are then collapsed together with an algorithm to really provide kind of a differentiation between the sites to understand, you know, where risk or further investigation is needed within the tools that are available.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, because it's important to understand one of the great benefits of this process is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. So different types of studies in different therapeutic areas and different sizes and phases. What we're trying to do is really create specific evaluations for those trials. So a lot of times what we're doing is we're comparing protocol deviations across all sites, so where we see variation, where we see outliers. So we're comparing across sites, across patients, objects, and looking for outliers in that way, and making it much more project and protocol specific. Again, that's one of the big benefits here. So you may not see absolute thresholds versus more tolerance level, right? Can Any more questions, or does anyone want to add to that? And a seminar on threshold tolerance levels next.
I think that's our next session.
Okay, this is.
Yep.
If there are more questions, if you all don't have anything else to add, then just let me know and I'll close you out.
More to add. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Great questions and joining. Thank you.
Thanks you all for your presentation today. For the attendees on the call here, please complete the post-webinar survey and evaluation that will pop up at close out of WebEx. If you have any trouble with that, just send me an email and I'll send you the questions. For more on good technology, clinical and business practices, and other webinar series, white papers, all kinds of educational material, member benefits, please go to our website, look at the member section. You can also read the site journal. That at Quarterly for Members, that's in the members section of our website, myscrs.org. Look forward to seeing all of you at the AP and Global Summits this year, the only conference series entirely focused on the needs of clinical research sites. I also look forward to having you join us next Thursday at noon, that's April 12th, for Module 4, an exploration of risk-based monitoring from the site perspective. Appreciate everyone's participation in today's program. I look forward to bringing you more webinars in the coming year. Today's session has been recorded. We will forward the link out to you within the next 24 hours. We look forward to your feedback. And thanks again for joining us. Bye-bye, everyone.